Well, I was in New York City for about 2.5 weeks, and I had this conversation with a friend of mine who's an architecture professor in Barcelona, Spain. And it was great. We walked around the city, and I had known a little bit about the history of these buildings and the architecture and modern architecture. Um, but it really opened my eyes, and his excitement and his enthusiasm infected me. And we walked to the the old Pan Am building, which is now the MetLife building, and it was designed by one of the founders of the Bauhaus, which is a German word meaning, what does it mean? The art of building, just like Bau house, building houses. Um, and we'll look at some pictures in a minute, and described how there was this new era of architecture, this new era of man, of humanity in the 20th century that the Bauhaus was trying to express, and that a new era had dawned, and like modernity. And it was, so I was a little skeptical, and I'm gonna explain my skepticism. um I mean, I embraced the concept of modernity, and I'm modern. I'm not medieval, I'm not Renaissance. I love modernity, but there was something about the forced sense that we're better, or we're like the next evolutionary stage, and like we've got to shed this past, that bothered me. And so, but anyway, so getting back to the building. So in fact, let's look at these buildings. I've got a PowerPoint here. Let's see if this works. Never have never quite works for me. Let's see if I can get this to work. uh Slideshow. So let's go to the Pan Am building, now called the MetLife building, by Walter Gropius, 1963, New York City. It's a beautiful building. It's kind of on top of Grand Central Station. It's very centrally located. And it's striking that this kind of uh, fringe architectural and artistic movement in Dessau, Germany, essentially took over the world. And starting in New York and Chicago, these architects like Walter Gropius and Mies van der Rohe, partly because of the Nazi regime, left Germany and went west, first France, and most of them ended up in the United States. And then New York and Chicago essentially set the tone for buildings and over the entire world. In fact, this became called the international style, or some people called it that, which is itself also a problem, because there's no such thing as an international style. Each style is tied to a culture. But anyway, and so Gropius wanted these glass walls, right angles, flat roofs, asymmetrical. In fact, the original design had the sign not centered, so it was like asymmetrical. Um, but I guess the Pan Am people made him put it in the middle. And this was this modernist style. And they had the sense that a new era had dawned, and that new building and social setup solutions were needed. And so we needed, and I love these buildings. I think it's a beautiful building. I love modern architecture. I love that they didn't just stick to the one style though, too. That would have been a problem. Let's look, for example, at another building, the Seagram building by Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, another German architect. Another beautiful building, 1958, New York City. And it's not the best picture, but you do get a sense it's completely made up of glass walls and straight lines. And the form follows the function. In fact, the form is the function. The actual straight lines going up are the actual structure of the building. They are the I-beams. And so it was this sense that they wanted to strip down ornamentation, make it less is more. That was one of Mies van der Rohe's statements. The focus is on the details, just the very precise relationships between the width versus the height, and how widely spaced out should be the windows, like all those little details. That's where the beauty and the artistry lies. And what's a couple of things are striking here. One is the fact that these men's, and they were mostly men architects, buildings essentially set the style for the entire world, which we still live in. Like this style of architecture, it's not exactly the same style, but this style influenced everybody all over the world. Dubai, Shanghai, Mexico City, like New York City. This is what people have done, and it's a good style. It works. It's functional. It also is less expensive. That was one of the things. Although people wanted to spend more money too. But you have it's hard to tell. But at the bottom, there's like an open space in front of the building. It's got an open plaza with a fountain, and even that, like the seating and so forth, is all very precise. It's a little bit asymmetrical, which makes it also kind of cool. The first floor is open. It's just this glass opening, so you can see. It's almost like the building is floating. The structure is steel and glass, very modern, very tall, and so this is what they were going for. Let me say a few more things about Bauhaus here. Oops. Oh, this is yeah. So this is Walter Gropius's first Bauhaus building in Dessau, Germany, 1926. And it's straight lines and it's glass walls, and it's not symmetrical. Each height of each part of the building is different, and it's different based on what it's needed. The form follows the function, and that's how you figure out how tall this part of the building should be. There's an aerial view, and you can see like it's a beautiful building. It's asymmetrical. It's got different heights, it's all white and black. And I'm having trouble getting out of this. Okay. And so the ideas here for the Bauhaus people were to reconcile art and craft. We tend to think of arts and crafts. Art is like what you put in the museum. Craft is what you put on your desk. Like that's a craft, like in your room. But why separate those? Let's put these more together. I think it's a good idea. Design, like the design of, well, my iPhone's the one I'm using right now as my camera. So, but the design of an iPhone is beautiful, and it's very simple, and it's very spare. That's a very similar kind of thought process. The importance of design, and also for use, like it's the perfect size for my pocket and so forth. Paul Klee, Kandinsky, other artists were going in there and bringing their art to the design, and bringing these things together. Vast surfaces, and they wanted to work intuitively, and that the forms and the colors would just kind of emerge. not based on previous styles. And I guess this is one of the things that maybe this is one of my bugbears. What's the word? One of the things that presses my button is when a modern thinker, a modern artist thinks, I'm breaking completely with the past and I'm doing something completely new. No, you're not. No one does that. Everyone's your very language, your very capacity to see things has been shaped by thousands of years of human work and culture and language, and so don't lie to yourself and think that you're like Mr. New, like creating out of ex nihilo, like God or something. So that's one of my nitpicky things. Um, yes, work intuitively. Yes, break canons of style and so forth. But to think that you're having a complete rupture from the past is just wrong. It's just false. And so, and that's one of the problems with modernity that I love modernity. As I said, I'm modern, but we need to be modern in a smart way and not in this kind of self-deceiving way that so many of these thinkers had. So, for example, Kandinsky, the painter Kandinsky, he's a Russian painter, leaves Russia when there's the revolution, the communist revolution, goes to Germany, joins the Bauhaus, and he tells this story. Great painter. I like Kandinsky. Not my favorite painter, but a good painter. And he tells this story of, he'd been painting and he's kind of walking down the street, comes home, and he sees a painting of intense, just amazing beauty. And he's just transfixed. He's like staring at it. He's like, wow, that's amazing. I love how the colors and the shapes are working there. And he's just amazed by it. And he's looking at it for a while. And then he's trying to figure out, so whose painting is this? And he looks at it and he's like, oh, that's my painting. It's turned sideways. And so he turns it right and says, oh yeah, but he liked it sideways. Let me turn it sideways. It's better that way. And what was his point was that instead of thinking about the object that he was trying to paint, he just saw like the color and the form and the style emancipated, he said, like a kind of freed from the object. How can I replace the object with just color and form and emotion and movement? And I get it. That's cool. Yeah, abstract art, I like it. But it's not that transformative and it's not freeing you from anything. Like the object isn't oppressing you. And so this, I tend to defend like styles and cultures that we've been handed down. And as much as I like Kandinsky, I think he's just deceiving himself, thinking like, I've emancipated the colors. Like, oh, come on. Like, yeah, it's good to do abstract art, but it's not bad to do, formative art. It's not like you're better than Michelangelo or something. Yeah, so this is the problem that, and this is kind of like a temporary foray into modern art and literature before I get back to the ancient stuff that we were doing before. And this all occurred to me because I was in New York and I was with this friend of mine who's an architect, and it was exciting to sort of see and to think about how important these buildings were and these architects, these Bauhaus guys and gals coming over from Germany into the United States, mostly. In New York, I love New York, and we went to the MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art, and then you see like the Picassos, and you see Mondrians and so forth, and the Kandinskys, and yeah, it's really important cultural historical material that we need to think about, and we're going to get there eventually. But don't get so like transformative on me. I mean, you're just like everybody else in history. You're not different. You're not different than, those Greek sculptors, making the statue of Athena or whatever. You're just like them. We're just doing all the same thing. We're all in the same boat. And so, um, and I was looking at this. Here's one guy. It's easy to pick on him, but his name's Adolf Loos, Loos. Looks like loose, but it's Loos. I think that's how you pronounce it. And he, in 1913, published a book called Ornament and Crime. That it's a crime to put ornamentation. Like, come on, get off it. And so here's his idea. His idea was, smooth, clear surfaces, straight lines, nothing extra. And he said that the evolution of culture is synonymous with the removal of ornamentation from objects of everyday use. That the evolution of culture, like, we're getting better, we're getting stronger, we're getting more advanced and progressive by getting rid of ornamentation. I mean, he would like hate architecture today because like it, we went through a kind of period of this sort of stripped down stuff, but people got tired of that. It was boring. Anyway, yeah. So don't get too full of yourself being so creative and unornamentation. Anyway, getting rid of the ornamentation. And so, yeah. And it's funny that like the people like Loos and to some extent Gropius and Mies, I love Gropius and Mies, I love their architecture, but I think there's something wrong with their ideas in that they see like we've got to free ourselves from these structures that are oppressing our minds. And the is this the case that there's a lot of trying to not oppress people and trying to free people from oppression, and I get that's good. And what was I saying here? It was the idea that any positive value, any positive vision of the good was inherently oppressive and needed to be shed so that I could have my more authentic self. And the Soviets in their communism tried to do that, and in the world of political philosophy, like, okay, we're just going to make everybody totally equal, and we're going to get rid of any kind of styles, and we're going to like establish this new socialist style, which is only value is like the working class worker. Well, but here's the thing: isn't it the case that usually, or at least many times, the person who tries hardest to not oppress people is the most violent oppressor in history? Well, that's the Soviet Union, that's China. That tends to happen because then become blind to the fact of these power dynamics, because you think like, well, I'm all good, I'm all like, we're for the working class, so like everything I do must be good, and anything against me must be bad, so I need to like squash those people or kill them or put them in gulags. So and this tends to happen like sometimes in universities today, like we're so tolerant, but like be careful what you say, because and then everyone's self-censoring because no one can say what they really think, because lest you be accused of being intolerant. So anyway, that's a whole nother story. And so let's go back to the share screen function here. PowerPoint. And so, so we were talking about the Bauhaus, wonderful architecture, straight lines, no ornamentation or very little ornamentation. And so this contrasts with like really old buildings like the White Tower in London from the 1080s, so over 1,000 years ago, which is full of all these kind of ornamentary things. I mean, some of them are functional, obviously, like if you're defending yourselves, you need these little crevasses, or what are they called? These little spaces so you can send arrows down on the people below you. And you have a nice solid wall so you can defend yourself, and these towers so you can see. But it also is beautiful. And it's also ornamentary, like these kind of arches um and then even the non-flatness of the surface is beautiful, and it's more human. And like we have in our modern world like all these straight lines and fake, like the shape of a car or the shape, which there's a certain beauty in it, but there's more beauty, isn't there? Like, I mean, humanity has developed among trees and among rocks and these unflat, unregular surfaces, and that's beautiful, and we need that. Here's a building from 1712, the old Royal Navy College in Greenwich in England, and it, you know, it's a mixture of like many different styles. You got these kind of Greek temple type styles here, and the columns, and these church-like domes, and it's very horizontal, obviously, and it's very symmetrical. Not perfectly symmetrical, although that's, you know, that would be kind of boring. So there's like some slight differences here in these chimneys and so forth. And it's on a river, which gives you that kind of natural unflat surface that kind of plays nicely off the building, and so forth. So and so yeah, so we need these ancient languages, stories, values, positive stories, images of the good. That means some things are bad, or some things are better than other things, and some things are more beautiful and some things are more ugly. Like we need to like assert these things if we're going to have any culture. And so we need ornamentation. um and it's good to sometimes have the non-ornamentation. I love my iPhone, I love my MacBook, which I'm using right now. It's very much in the kind of Bauhaus design mode of less is more, and smooth surfaces, and very functional. So yeah, we need that too. But yeah, we're going to get back next time to more of the classical ancient stories of the Chinese and the and the Greeks and the Hebrews. Like, and the differences are important. The fact that they're not totally over the world, that they're tied to a place and a people and a practice and a religion, and those things are so crucial to human flourishing.